So, what exactly is happening? Because Trump is calling Putin, he's calling European leaders, and he's talking about a peace deal, but he's not talking about a ceasefire. So, literally, everybody right now is on the edge because trust issues are there. Trust is at an all time low because nobody knows if you can trust this man because he's talking directly to Putin without any of the European leaders present. So, my question is Putin trying to divide the West? And by West, I mean US and Europe. Welcome to my channel. My name is Tanya, and I break down geopolitical events without the jargon and clickbait headlines. Now, before we get into this actual question, let's look at the background. Why Russia and Ukraine are fighting? There are three major reasons. Number one is obviously Russia does not want Ukraine to get a NATO membership. Now, what exactly is NATO? NATO is actually a military alliance led by US, which was founded in 1948 by 12 nations. Right now it has 32 member countries. But it was founded right after World War II when Europe's economy was in shambles and US had just become a superpower. So Europe wanted economic rebuilding plus political stability because there was threat of communist influence in the Eastern Europe. Now, the central idea of NATO is collective defense, that if you attack one, that means you attack all. It is basically given in its Article 5, and it says a collective defense organization assists a member states under attack by any outside country. That means if Ukraine joins NATO, and then if Russia threatens or attacks Ukraine, then all the NATO members plus US will collectively respond to Russia militarily. Now, the second reason is that Russia wants a buffer zone against the West. Now, this is the proposed buffer zone in Ukraine, which is actually quite similar to the territories that it has annexed. And now, this border, the Russia-Ukraine border, is approximately equal to 2,000 kilometers, and most of it are flat plains, so it is extremely easy to cross. Also, there were a lot of historical invasions in Russia, be it 1812 Napoleon Bonaparte or 1841 Hitler. So, all of those invasions kind of led to Russian having a defensive mindset. Plus, if Ukraine joins NATO, then US troops will be stationed right at Russia's doorsteps. So, Russia's reaction time will decrease if in future anything happens. So, if it has a buffer zone, it will be able to control its military, even its politics or policies for its own security purposes. Now, the third reason is the political fear. Putin's political fear. Now, Putin does not want Ukraine's democracy to be fully integrated with the Western democracy. But Ukraine wants to be a democratic nation. It is inclined towards the European definitions of democracy. But if that happens, then Russia, the dream of its sphere of influence, will be lost forever. Along with that, the eastern part of Ukraine has a lot of Russian-speaking population. So Russia identifies itself with this area as well. So if it loses the whole sphere of influence on Ukraine, then it will be considered a strategic and symbolic loss for Russia. Now, this was the background. Now, let's look at what is happening right now. Current situation is that there are a lot of territories that have been claimed by Russia. These are the territories starting with Crimea in 2014, and we are now here. So, Ukraine has been fighting back, and it has been fighting back since 3 years now with the help of both US and Europe. But now we see a little bit of difference in these two. Why? Because Europe wants a complete and immediate ceasefire between the two, and US is urging for a peace deal. Now, what is this peace deal? We'll look at it later on. But now, because of this difference between US and Europe, Trump wanted to reassert himself internationally, so he put forth the idea of direct negotiations with Putin, and that is why the Alaska meeting happened. So, Trump met Putin in Alaska, but nothing substantial really came out of it. There was no ceasefire, and Putin was very adamant that Ukraine should not join NATO. Second, the territories that Russia has de facto control over right now should be acknowledged as Russian territories. And third, Putin allowed a security guarantee plan for Ukraine by US and Europe. And the meeting that happened between European leaders and Trump, its main agenda was the security guarantee plan, which was going to be very similar to the NATO protection plan, but there will be no legal binding here, like unlike the Article 5 of NATO. So countries will be able to supply weapons, aid, and have joint military exercises with Ukraine, but it will not be legally binding. Apart from this, in this meeting there was a weapon deal. So what happened was, US said that we are no longer going to provide, or we do not want to provide, free aid to Ukraine, because that is obviously costing American taxpayers a lot. So Ukraine offered to buy 90 to 100 billion dollar worth of weapons from US, upon which US urged Europe to help pay for this whole thing. And another interesting thing that happened in this meeting was that Trump paused the whole meeting to give a call to Putin and ask him if he will talk to Zelensky and if they can have a trilateral summit sometime later on. Now, Putin has not confirmed it yet, but this is a classic example of Trump tactics, wherein he is placing himself in a position like he is the sole negotiator, like he's so essential for the whole world peace. Second is that it cannot even ignore America, because it needs America's military and intelligence to stand against Russia. But can we really trust Trump? Because Europe wants a ceasefire. But what is Trump urging for? He's urging for a peace deal. Now, this peace deal is actually a territorial compromise, which would include the territories that are in de facto control of Russia to be acknowledged as Russian territories. And yes, it would end the war, but it would also reward Russia's invasion, and it would leave Ukraine very weak. And this is very dangerous for Europe, because if Russia is awarded once, what stops it from threatening Poland or even Baltic states next? So in this whole thing, Putin's game is of patience, because there are a lot of disagreements that are being awaited right now. First of all, with respect to the security guarantee, how strong should these guarantees be? Who will control it, Europe or US? Because Europe doesn't want US to play a central role in the security guarantee plan, because it has already had its experiences with NATO. Second, this security guarantee plan, it actually sounds very promising in theory, but it's very weak in practice. For example, take 1994 ka Budapest Memorandum, wherein Ukraine gave up its nuclear powers in exchange for security, which Russia later broke. So by accepting this guarantee instead of NATO, Putin gets to weaken Ukraine's long-term protection while still looking flexible in peace talks. So where do we exactly stand right now? First of all, the West is fragile at the moment. Trump wants to be the sole broker of peace, and Putin is playing his cards actually really well. But it is not over until it's over. Questions are still there. There is a future checklist that we need to maintain, and that is, first of all, when will the Zelensky-Putin meeting actually happen? We need a date, we need a venue. Until then, skepticism is actually very high. Then, when it comes to the security guarantee, Europe needs to lay down an actual plan with wordings. Actual written plan is needed, and that is going to take a lot of time. Third is, who pays that $100 billion and how quickly? So there are a lot of questions, but if you want to stay on top of all these global developments in Russia, Ukraine, Trump's move, Europe, like this video, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram for regular updates.